Hello, everybody. I'm Julie Trackler, Assistant Director for the Ohio Department of Aging. In this next and final segment, we'll be talking about a second funding opportunity to assist you by offsetting costs for reopening and losses that you have incurred due to the pandemic. We offered the same opportunity last fall, so this is an update with new extended dates for eligibility. I'll talk with you about the purpose of this opportunity and give you a recap of the first opportunity that went out and also the second opportunity and talk about eligibility. And then after that, Jessica Martin and Jason Bartholow of the Office of Budget and Management will provide some hands-on and actually eyes-on visuals to explain the process for applying for these funds. And then I will come back and talk to you about additional questions that are specific to this request, the timeline for this grant opportunity, and what support you can count on from us. So what is the purpose of this funding opportunity? This funding opportunity is to assist you in offsetting costs incurred for necessary expenditures that you've incurred in order to comply with health orders, safe reopenings, and related response activities due to the COVID-19 public health emergency, and also to compensate for losses due to your business interruptions. We'd also like to point out that if you are assisting with vaccines in your communities, this would also be counted as expenses that you can turn in. So who's eligible? Adult day and senior centers. So coronavirus relief funds. Let's talk quickly about these funds. These are coronavirus relief funds, and on October 16th, 2020, we announced that we had a $15.2 million allotment available to support your reopening efforts. At that time, this time period for these funds ended at the end of December. The time period was expanded into 2021, so we're pleased that we're able to announce and launch the second funding opportunity today. For the first opportunity, we awarded $4.8 million to those entities that applied. So based on applications at that time, that was the total of the payments made. Thus, for the second opportunity, we have about $10.4 million available for award. So eligibility, who's eligible? Again, Ohio's adult day service providers and senior center providers. You can be private, nonprofit, or government funded. And for those of you who receive funding through the first opportunity, you're probably wondering if you're eligible for this second opportunity. The second opportunity expands the time period from March 1st, 2020 to June 30, 2021. So if you have incurred additional expenses and losses, yes, you are eligible to apply. For those who did not apply for the first opportunity, you are also eligible to apply for the time period, again, back to March 1st, 2020 through June 30 of 2021. So with that, we'll now move on into the grant application process. First up, Jason Bartholow will talk about the state's requirements to sign up in our supplier system in order for you to receive your payment electronically through your bank. There are a few steps, and Jason has some good visuals, so we encourage you to stay tuned in to this webinar, but immediately after it closes, we ask you to go to the supplier portal if you're not already a registered provider, and get yourself registered to receive your supplier ID. After Jason, Jessica Martin, also of the Office of Budget Management, will walk through the foundational information of these grant funds, and we'll walk you through the first half of the application. And then I'll join back in and walk you through the second half, and we'll finish up after that. So with this intro, I will turn it over to Jason to explain how to receive your supplier ID. Jason?
Thanks, Julie. And again, my name is Jason Bartholow from the Office of Budget Management. And I want to talk to you about an important first step in the grant application process, and that is registering as a State of Ohio supplier. This is a two-step process. Very important to note that there are two steps. First, you'll register for your OHID, and that is the login credential system that the state has adopted for access to many state applications, including the supplier portal. So if you don't already have an OHID, when you go to the supplier portal at supplier.ohio.gov. You'll see a link, a button to create a new OHID account. So you'll click on that button. Next slide, please. And from there, you'll enter your information for an OHID. It's a pretty straightforward process, but you're going to enter your name information and a date of birth. And then you can also add a phone number and the last four of your social security number should you choose to. Those are optional at this stage. And if you have any concerns about, entering this personal information, just note that we're collecting this information so that we can ensure that you actually are the person who's registering and limit fraud opportunities. So we collect this information to make sure, that we've got the right person registering for an account in your name. You'll enter your email address information, and it's important that you click that verify your email address checkbox, and that's going to send an email to your email address with a PIN number, and you'll enter that PIN here. Once you've done that, then you'll set up your user ID and password. The guidelines for both the user ID and password are provided, so it's important that you note those and create a user ID and password that meet the requirements. And then you'll agree to some terms and conditions and answer the verification question. Just make sure that you're not a robot trying to create an ID, and then click Create Account. Once you've done that, you'll see that you've successfully created your OHID account. And with that, you've completed step one of this two-step process. So once you have your OHID set up, you'll go back to the supplier portal at supplier.ohio.gov and enter the username and password that you created in step one. Once you've done that, click Login. Next slide, please. And then you'll see this page with three panels. And if we can scroll down just a little bit, in that middle panel, you'll see New Supplier, and you'll click Start Registration. Once you click that, you'll see this Begin Registration page, and it gives you some information about things that you need to have available as you begin the registration process. It's important to note that you will need a hand-signed copy of your W-9 form. And when you fill out that W-9, it's important that you record the correct legal business name. This is the name that you use when you file your taxes with the IRS annually. And then the associated TIN number, and also the correct tax classification for your business or situation. You also want to have your banking information. The state of Ohio wants to pay you electronically, and so we'll require banking information in one of the later steps of the registration process, and then also the address to which you want payment sent. With that information, you'll click Start Registration and work through each of the train stops indicated on the line with the circle icons at the top of the page. Through the process, you're able to save if you need to and come back to the registration later. If you choose to do that, you'll log in again, and then when you get to this page, you'll see Continue Registration. You can click that and it'll take you back into the registration and you can complete the process. Do want to note again that you'll be required to enter banking information, and then also that last step in the process for commodity codes. You'll be able to select the type of business that you have, and that'll allow the state to send you information about future contract opportunities. Once you've fully completed the registration and clicked to agree to terms and conditions and submitted the application, you'll get this registration ID. It's important to note that this ID is not your supplier ID, but it is an ID that you can use should you need to contact OBM about your registration. That'll help our shared services associates to find your application. Once you've submitted, about 2 or 3 days later, you should receive a response from OBM Shared Services, either with your supplier ID or with instructions for correcting some information. Once you have the supplier ID, the process is complete and you can use that in your grant application process. So just a quick overview. You're going to create your OHID for login, and then you will register as a supplier of services. You'll receive a registration ID, and then a couple of days later, you'll receive either your supplier ID or further instructions. And then you can begin the grant application process. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jessica Martin.
Thanks, Jason. Yes, now I'm going to talk you guys through the overview of the coronavirus relief funding, a little bit about what are some eligible and ineligible costs, and then how to actually go about applying for the funding. So basically, the Coronavirus Relief Fund is federal financial assistance from the U.S. Department of Treasury. The performance period is from March 1st of 2020 through December 31st of 2021. But you remember, as Julie said, for this specific opportunity, the allowable project period is between March 1st, 2020 and June 30th, 2021. Next slide. There are a couple of different authoritative requirements. So the CARES Act, the U.S. Department of Treasury guidance, and they have frequently asked questions as well. There's a couple of uniform guidance sections, but the most pertinent thing for your population will be the additional guidance that's provided by Ohio Department of Aging, and that is an attachment in the portal that we'll show you a little bit later. Next slide. So just some overarching cost eligibility criteria. Basically, if the cost is a necessary expenditure due to COVID, so something you wouldn't have otherwise purchased or had to spend money on before the COVID-19 virus, that is one of the key criteria for it being eligible. Secondly, is if it's something that was not previously budgeted, so in prior years you wouldn't have spent money on it, and then if it was incurred during the appropriate period. So some specific examples and the things we're seeing most commonly, especially with different providers, are PPE equipment, disinfection of public areas, enhanced cleaning. If there's different touchless precautions that you're putting into place, like in bathrooms or in different public areas, any barriers or social distancing measures that you're installing, even communicating or complying with public health orders, expenses associated with COVID-19 testing, contact tracing, even for quarantining employees. These are all eligible costs as well. I know with your population, especially food delivery to vulnerable populations, that is an eligible cost as well. And then a couple other ones are business interruption costs. So costs that were caused by closures or reductions, if you had a loss of revenue for your business. And these could be different operating costs, that you would have to cover in order to make sure you don't go out of business completely. So it could be personnel, insurance, utilities, rent, groundskeeping, etc. Please do note, though, that governments are not allowed to use business interruption costs as revenue replacement. Can you go back one slide? Other types of entities are allowed to use this business interruption costs. And I did just want to point out too, 1099s will be sent for the amount of the funds. And like what Jason was saying, that's why it's very important that you use your tax name when you're submitting your supplier ID. Okay, next slide. Some different prohibited use of funds. I won't go through all of these, but workforce bonuses, anything that is already reimbursed, if you received other federal funding such as the PPP, severance pay, prepayments on contracts. So you can review these later. Next slide. Please do keep any support for how you use the funds for a period of 5 years to align with the Treasury requirements. And you can provide those in case of audit or monitoring visit. Next slide. And the financial status reporting, this will also take place through the grants portal. So if you receive the funding from the first opportunity, you are already familiar with this. And your reporting date will be July 7th, 2021. And so that'll be any, activities that took place or your expenditures that took place through June 30th. And you can go to our website and see more reporting resources, and you'll get reminder emails, once that reporting is available and due. So finally, how to apply for the opportunity. So you'll go to the grants website for Ohio, which is grants.ohio.gov to find it. And next slide. So at the top, you'll click on funding opportunity. And then that will bring you to this page, and then you'll have to click access to the active opportunities, that button. There is a little area, and you can see even on the side here, for archive funding opportunities. So after the application period closes and you want to go back and see the original information, you'll be able to find it under that section. So then you'll click on one of the funding opportunities, and then you can bring up specific details about that. So the time period, the project period, different financial details even. Here's an example of one that's currently open for veterans posts. Then at the bottom of that page, you'll click on the register button. And here is an example of what the application will look like. It is not, this is a previous example, but it'll look very similar to what you will see. And I know Julie will go over the exact questions that you'll see. So you'll just fill out some information about your organization, just basic demographic information. And then here's where you can associate your supplier ID with your application. So it is optional at this stage, but remember, like Julie and Jason were already explaining, that the supplier ID will be required for the actual payment. So if you already have it, then you can, go through this lookup process. And you just enter your supplier ID and or your supplier name, and you can search for it, and it'll return a list. And then you just select the correct supplier record. Then there will be 20 additional questions. Again, these are just the sample questions that you'll have to answer. And as you can see, the fields are notated in red with an asterisk, so they will be required questions. But it's just going to help the Department of Aging vet the different applications and then know how to award the payment amounts. Then there's some information about the different compensated officials so that we can fulfill FAFATA requirements. So these may not apply to all organizations, and you will know if they apply by answering the different yes/no questions, and then it will pop up if it applies, and you'll just have to complete that. For the authorized representative and the grant contact, it's important to put the individual that you want to be completing the activity reporting as the grant contact. The authorized representative is just someone else in your organization that's able to speak to us on behalf of the organization. But yeah, the grant contact is the main one that will be getting notifications and reminder emails about financial reporting, and then also about approval or if there's more information needed. And then on this last page, so this is the certification page. So, just read through, and then you are certifying that you agree to, and this is example wording, you're agreeing to all this by applying, and then you will hit eventually where it says form being complete at the bottom, that will say submit. So you can go to the next slide. If there is something that's not completed on the application, so if you missed one of those fields, then the form incomplete button will say like that, and it won't let you submit it. So, just make sure, double check that everything has been completed, and then that will change to a submit button, and you'll be able to submit it. And then now I'll hand it over to Julie, who's going to go through the different additional questions that are specific for your funding opportunity.
Thanks, Jessica. This is Julie again. As Jessica mentioned a few slides ago, there are additional questions. So I will walk you through these required questions. These are specific to your business experience before and during the pandemic and is used for our analysis. So there's 20 questions in total. I'll quickly touch on all of them and we'll dive deeper into just a few where we think you may have questions. So question one, this question is making the point that you'll be asked for the name and contact of your authorized rep and your grant contact. And Jessica mentioned that just a minute ago. So this is important, and this is basically just a yes or no. We just want to make sure that you understand the distinction that we'll be chasing the grant contact more so. Question two is just a reminder to register to be a supplier. So yes, no there. Question three asks if you applied for our first round of funding, and if you did, list that award amount. Question four, list an A or a B depending on your business structure, private, nonprofit, or government. As this comes up, it's one of the final questions in the application, so just be aware of that. But it's important that your grant contact be easily accessible. So question 5 and 6, they're asking about your staffing levels pre-pandemic and currently. Questions 7 and 8 are asking about the number of older adults that you're serving pre-pandemic and currently. And question 9 asks about the services that you provide. Question 10 lists your, asks about your funding sources. So if you just list those there. Questions 11, 12, and 13 pertain to your last audit and your fiscal year end date. 14 asks for the date that you reopened or the date that you plan to reopen. Question 15 asks the number of days that you operate, either that you will operate or currently operating. 16 asks about the services that you will or are currently providing. For 17, 18, and 19, I want to hone in on these just a bit more. 17 focuses on your actual expenditures and your actual business losses. 18 focuses on your estimated expenditures and estimated business losses. And 19, but we're going to stay on this slide for now, focuses on actual and estimated expenditures to reopen. So let's look at question 17 a little deeper here. It says provide separately the actual expenditures in dollars and business losses in dollars experienced as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this is for the period of March 1st, 2020 through February 28th, 21. So these are actual expenditures. So that's what we're asking for here. And ultimately you can add like one number and then hit a return and enter that second number for the expenditures and losses. In question 18, this is the estimated expenditures. Again, expenditures estimated and business losses, again, estimated for the period of now, March 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2021. So again, you can list those two amounts in that space. And 19, question 19, this asks for your actual and estimated expenses to safely reopen. So for this question, you will take the amount that you have from March 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. And again, all of these questions ask, the statement is, do not include any expenses that you have already or are expected to be reimbursed by any federal or state relief dollars. So if you've already included these dollars once, you can't count them again. So just be sure that any expenses listed here are new expenses that you did not previously report. And then finally, question 20 asks about the funds that you received if you are a Medicaid provider, and we ask for your 7-digit Medicaid provider number. So again, for each of the two-part questions, you can hit the return key to go to a second line or just leave space in between each of the two questions that we ask right there. This grant opportunity will open today. It should be live following this webinar. And you can begin applying today, but remember to first go to the supplier.ohio.gov website to establish your supplier ID if you have not already done that. This application process and portal remains open through Friday, April 9th. And then following the closure of the portal and this application period, the Department of Aging will begin its analysis of your submitted applications. This duration of the review will depend on the number of applications that we receive, but you can trust that we will be moving, as quickly but as accurately as possible. The analysis of the first award took about 6 weeks to get through all of the applications. After that, we will make the determinations and payments will be issued, and you will be notified at that time. So from a support perspective, in the portal, you will find 3 job aids to assist you in this application process, in your grants reporting process, and there's also guidance and frequently asked questions that you can look at there. If you have questions, though, that aren't answered through those sources, you can certainly email us at grants@age.ohio.gov, as you'll see there, grants@age.ohio.gov. And this concludes this segment of the webinar, as well as the webinar itself. So we greatly appreciate you tuning in, and thank you so very much for your continued commitment during this pandemic and all that you have done and are doing for your clients. Many thanks, and take care.